There is a moment, silent, invisible, almost imperceptible, when the veil begins to lift. You may not even recognize it at first. One day you're sipping coffee, scrolling mindlessly, or walking beneath a sky that feels more like a screen than a cathedral, and suddenly something shifts. You can't explain why that tree seems to be whispering, or why the eyes of a stranger momentarily reflect galaxies. Time starts behaving like warm wax. The past melts, the future vanishes, and all that remains is this thick, eternal now. This is where the weirdness begins. Not because something outside of you changes, but because you have. Stay with me until the end of this journey, because what unfolds in the coming moments might just echo something you've always known, but were too afraid to name. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. We are just getting started, and the rabbit hole goes deep. Spiritual enlightenment is not the clean, sanitized enlightenment depicted in pastel-colored infographics. No. It is strange, untamed, and riddled with paradoxes that ripple through your identity like lightning through ancient stone. It is the realization that what you called you might have just been a performance, a costume stitched from memory, language, culture, and fear. Enlightenment tears through that tapestry like a cosmic wind, leaving you naked but reborn. The oddities that arise during this process are not glitches or anomalies. They are sacred disturbances. They are the universe's way of tapping on the glass of your illusion and saying, "Wake up, traveler. The dream is breaking." And what a curious dream it has been. One where clocks enslave consciousness, where souls wear names, where we mistake mirrors for windows and windows for walls. You may begin to sense others' emotions like a sudden gust before a storm. You might laugh without reason, weep for strangers, or watch your reflection blur until you no longer recognize the one staring back. These are not symptoms of madness, but of expansion. The strangeness is not evidence of dysfunction. It is the first proof that the ego has loosened its grip and that consciousness is slipping into its true form, unbounded, wild, divine. It's ironic, isn't it? We seek spiritual awakening like it's a serene retreat, a sanctuary for the soul. But when it truly arrives, it crashes like thunder across the plains of the mind. It breaks things, it unsettles, it removes the scaffolding of certainty and leaves you floating, directionless, in a sea of radiant unknowns. You stop believing in coincidences, numbers start appearing in patterns, synchronicities form like constellations, guiding your internal compass towards something that cannot be mapped. And here's where it gets really weird. Your dreams shift, not just in color or clarity, but in dimension. They no longer feel separate from waking life. You begin to see them as other chapters of the same book. Sometimes you'll dream of people you've never met, only to encounter them days later. Time reverses. You feel yourself remembering things you haven't lived yet. And the line between inside and outside dissolves, like ink in water. But enlightenment is not a final destination. It is a spiral staircase with no end, each turn revealing deeper truths, stranger realities. You might start noticing that your body behaves differently. The foods you once craved repulse you. Your heartbeat aligns with moon cycles. Your energy fluctuates like tides pulled by an unseen gravity. Animals behave oddly around you. Birds come closer, dogs stare longer. You start feeling watched, not in a paranoid sense, but in the sense that something ancient and intelligent is witnessing you awaken. There is a cosmic humor that creeps in. You begin to laugh at things you once feared. Death becomes a concept you no longer dread, because something in you has already died, and what remains cannot be touched by time. This humor is not cynical, it is divine. It is the laughter of stars, the comedy of seeing behind the mask. And then there's the sense of loss. Oh yes, no one warns you about that. The grief. Because with every illusion shattered, something familiar falls away. Friends may drift, conversations feel hollow. You might walk through a crowd and feel like a ghost wrapped in stardust, but you are not lost. You are simply being reborn faster than the world around you can comprehend. Your presence begins to distort the matrix, glitch the code. You become a mirror to others, and some won't like what they see reflected. Still, through all of it, through the trembling nights, the visions, the unspoken knowing, you carry a strange, sacred stillness, a seed of something vast planted in your chest, a warmth that says, "This is real. This is home." The weirdness becomes your compass. It tells you when you're aligned. It tells you when you're expanding. And slowly, beautifully, you stop resisting. You stop asking to go back. Because you understand now that spiritual enlightenment is not about becoming perfect, but becoming real. It is not about ascending to some untouchable realm, but descending into the full texture of existence with new eyes. It is not an escape. It is an arrival. The weird things that happen are not the side effects. They are the signs. When the veil lifts, it doesn't just expose something hidden. It dissolves the frame entirely. This is where we begin to truly understand the core terrain of spiritual enlightenment, not as a destination, but as an unraveling. What is weird is not what is happening. It's that you're finally seeing what has always been there. The world hasn't changed, you have. And the laws that governed your previous perception, those quiet, unquestioned rules of logic, separation, identity, begin to collapse like old scaffolding under the weight of new sight. At the center of this collapse is one fundamental realization. What you are is not your name, your story, or even your thoughts. You are awareness itself, timeless and unbound, witnessing the dance of form through an endless kaleidoscope of perspectives. And once this knowing takes root, not just as an idea, but as an embodied truth, reality begins to rearrange itself accordingly. You stop living life as though you're pushing against it and start flowing with it, like a river remembering it was never separate from the sea. One of the first strange signs of this realignment is the sense that everything is communicating with you, not metaphorically, literally. Numbers repeat. Animals cross your path at oddly significant times. A book falls open to a line that shatters your silence. It's as if the universe, once opaque and indifferent, has become a living mirror, echoing your inner state in real time. This isn't magical thinking. It's pattern recognition at a cosmic level. The universe is not random. It is rhythmic, and once you match its pulse, it begins to echo yours. This shift also awakens you to the illusion of separation. You no longer see yourself as a singular unit moving through a world of others, but as a node in an infinite field of consciousness. Duality begins to lose its grip. The tree and the breath, the wind and the skin, the stranger's eyes and your own heartbeat, they all start humming in unison. Even your thoughts, once believed to be private, seem less like your own inventions and more like ripples moving through a shared sea of mind. And here's the paradox. Even as this unity blooms, your individual life becomes more vivid, not less. You start tasting colors with more intensity. Music doesn't just play, it vibrates through your ribcage like a language you once knew. The smallest things become sacred. A drop of rain on your palm feels like a divine signature. You begin to worship the ordinary, not out of superstition, but because you finally understand that nothing is ordinary. Everything is alive. At the same time, you confront the deep layers of unconsciousness that once ran your life. Your shadows surface, the false identities you've clung to, the achiever, the victim, the lover, the outcast. Each one steps forward to be dissolved in the light of your awareness. It's messy. You don't just experience bliss, you experience cleansing. And what's strange is how physical this process can be. Old traumas surface not only emotionally, but through the body, shaking, sweating, trembling. The spirit's way of purging what no longer belongs. Through all this, your relationship with time begins to fracture. It no longer feels like a linear sequence, but a multi-dimensional tapestry. You catch glimpses of the future, not as fate, but as possibility. Déjà vu becomes frequent, and you realize that memory can work in both directions. The past becomes fluid, reinterpreted with every new level of awareness. What you once saw as a tragedy may now appear as initiation. You begin to see how every heartbreak, every failure, every delay was not a punishment, but preparation. Another major theme of spiritual enlightenment is the inversion of values. You start releasing the things you once chased: status, control, validation. Not because you're above them, but because you see through them. The ladder you were climbing was leaning against the wrong wall. And in this strange inversion, you begin attracting what you stopped chasing. Peace replaces ambition. Silence replaces noise. Presence replaces performance. You are no longer trying to get somewhere. You realize you've always been there. But the weirdest thing of all may be this: you start to feel invisible and infinite at the same time. The ego, once a roaring engine of self-definition, begins to fall silent. You move through the world with less resistance, like wind through trees. People may not notice you the same way. Some are drawn to your presence like moths to a candle, while others feel discomfort, as if you remind them of something they've forgotten. You begin to operate more by intuition than logic, more by resonance than reason. And slowly, one subtle thread runs through all these phenomena: the collapse of fear. Not because you've become fearless, but because you've located your identity beyond the one who fears. You realize that fear is not a signal to run. It's a signal to turn inward, to listen, to wake up. Fear becomes a teacher. Doubt becomes a door. Pain becomes purification. And this strange alchemy is perhaps the most powerful theme of all. Enlightenment doesn't give you more. It strips away what you never needed. It doesn't make you special. It makes you transparent. It doesn't turn you into a god. It reminds you that you already are one, dreaming itself through this temporary form. And as you begin to live from this knowing, the weirdness becomes less startling and more sacred. You come to understand that reality has never been objective. It's always been a projection, a song played by the soul through the strings of perception. And the moment you awaken to that, the instrument changes, the melody deepens. Imagine, if you will, a temple carved into the side of a mountain that does not exist on any map. It is not made of stone, nor wood, nor time. This temple lives within the architecture of the soul, and it is here, during the strange flowering of enlightenment, that you are brought not by feet, but by frequency. You don't walk to it, you remember it. And within this sacred space, strange stories begin to unfold, not as fiction, but as parables written in the margins of your being. Let me tell you the story of the dreamer and the mirror. There once was a being of light who descended into a world of form to play the ancient game of forgetting. This being was infinite, timeless, formless, pure awareness. But it wanted to taste limitation, to know itself in contrast. So it wrapped itself in skin and story, gave itself a name, a culture, a past. And in doing so, it forgot what it truly was. This was not a mistake. This was the beginning of the journey. The dreamer wandered the world believing the mirror was the self, believing the voice in the mind was the master, believing the separation it saw was real. It suffered. It triumphed. It fell in love and lost and aged and wept and laughed. But something within the dreamer, something old and unbroken, never stopped pulsing. A strange rhythm like a forgotten song, a call to return. And one day, when the noise of the world became unbearable, the dreamer fell silent long enough to hear it. That silence shattered everything. The mirror cracked. And for the first time, the dreamer saw not a reflection, but a window. Beyond the glass, starlight, memory, eternity. And the moment the dreamer realized the mirror was never real, the mirror smiled back. It had never been there to deceive. It was always there to awaken. This is the symbolic nature of spiritual enlightenment. It is a remembering, a re-encounter with the eternal within the temporal. And as that remembrance deepens, new symbols emerge from the unconscious like old friends bearing messages. Dreams, once chaotic, begin to speak in riddles that make perfect sense to the soul. Archetypes come alive. The wise old woman, the shadow, the trickster, the inner child. And you realize these were never just psychological constructs. They are real forces embedded in the blueprint of reality. Take the shadow, for instance. In the early stages of awakening, people often mistake enlightenment for perpetual peace. But in truth, one of the weirdest and most important signs of enlightenment is confrontation with your deepest darkness. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your twin, the forgotten part of yourself that carries pain, rage, shame, and the very power you've been seeking. Enlightenment does not destroy the shadow. It integrates it, transfigures it, and allows its raw energy to become fuel for higher awareness. Then there is the sacred fool, the one who laughs in the face of fear, who dances on the edge of logic, who wears absurdity as a crown. The fool shows up in strange moments. When you start seeing the cosmic joke in all things, you miss a train only to meet a stranger who delivers the exact message you needed. You lose something precious only to discover you never needed it. These are not accidents. These are the fool's gifts. They shatter linear thinking and invite the divine chaos of intuition. You may also encounter the symbol of the spiral. This appears in dreams, in nature, in meditative visions. It is the shape of growth without end. It reminds you that enlightenment is not a mountain peak, but an infinite unfolding. Every time you think you've arrived, the spiral invites you inward again, to deeper layers of humility, deeper insights, stranger truths. There is no final truth. There is only the deepening of the question. And perhaps the most haunting and beautiful symbol of all is the deathless flame. It comes in dreams or in stillness. It is a fire that does not consume. It is the part of you that does not die. During the journey of awakening, you may feel like everything familiar is burning away. Your beliefs, your goals, your sense of identity. But this flame remains. It is not born and does not end. It is the witness, the holy spark, the eternal core of your being. And when you come into contact with it, truly come face to face, you realize that nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal ever truly existed. These symbolic experiences don't happen only during meditation or in altered states. They leak into your waking life like poetry bleeding through paper. A conversation suddenly becomes an oracle. A random image holds a secret. The universe begins speaking in symbols, and you learn to read its language, not with your mind, but with your essence. It is through this lens that the weirdness of enlightenment becomes sacred. The oddities are not distractions. They are metaphors turned real. They are the cosmos reaching through the curtain and saying, look closer, you're almost there. And so you do. You begin to live in myth, not as fantasy, but as the deepest reality. Because the mythic dimension is not elsewhere. It is the inner lining of this world, waiting for eyes that can see. And when you walk with that knowing, when you carry these sacred symbols in your chest, the world opens like a manuscript written just for you. It's one thing to glimpse the infinite while deep in meditation, or during a silent walk beneath stars so ancient they no longer remember your name. It's another thing entirely to carry that awareness into a grocery store, a traffic jam, a tense conversation with someone who still believes you are who you used to be. The real strangeness of spiritual enlightenment is not in the visions or the symbols. It's in the quiet revolution of everyday life. Enlightenment does not pull you away from the world. It immerses you in it more deeply than ever before. Let's begin with something deceptively simple: presence. After awakening begins to unfurl, presence becomes magnetic. Not in a flashy theatrical way, but in a subtle, undeniable current. People feel it. They linger near you, sometimes without knowing why. Conversations shift. Strangers confide in you. Children stare as if recognizing something beyond the veil. Your presence begins to harmonize the space you occupy, not because you're doing anything, but because you've become still enough to allow the world to remember itself through you. You'll find that your relationship with time alters in the mundane as well. The hurried, fragmented clock time begins to soften. You stop living in deadlines and begin living in doorways, in moments of intuitive timing. You start showing up exactly when you're supposed to. The right people call you at the right time. The schedule begins to obey something other than logic. This is not laziness, it is alignment. Life starts moving through you instead of you pushing against it. Work transforms too. not just the kind that earns money, but the very idea of purpose. The old drive for achievement or recognition may begin to feel hollow, like eating wax fruit. Instead, a strange, quiet calling rises. You find yourself compelled to serve, to create, to heal, to speak truth, not because someone told you to, but because the soul cannot do otherwise. Work becomes worship. Creativity becomes channeling. The mundane becomes meaningful. Washing dishes is no longer a chore. It is communion with water, motion, and stillness. This shift often causes friction in relationships. You may outgrow connections that once felt essential. The roles you used to play, the fixer, the people pleaser, the martyr, begin to crumble. You start speaking more truth, even when it's uncomfortable. You set boundaries, not as walls, but as sacred lines drawn from self-awareness. Some people will drift away, others may lash out, and yet, amidst the grief of that letting go, you begin to attract those who resonate with your new frequency. Souls who reflect the vastness you're learning to embody. Physical changes also ripple through the body like echoes of internal transformation. You may need more rest or less food. You might crave silence the way others crave stimulation. Some days you may feel an almost electric energy moving through your limbs. Kundalini, life force, chi. It rises unexpectedly, flowing through your spine like a whisper from a higher plane. This is the body catching up to the soul. It is not always comfortable, but it is always meaningful. Even the way you speak begins to change. You become more precise with your words, or sometimes more silent. You start sensing when language is a bridge, and when it is a barrier. You begin listening not just with ears, but with your whole being. Your intuition sharpens. You walk into a room and immediately feel the energy. You stop needing proof. You live by resonance. Truth becomes a frequency, not a debate. Money, too, undergoes a transformation in meaning. It no longer feels like power or identity. It becomes a flow, a resource, a means of amplification. You stop chasing it, and it starts flowing toward you, not as a reward, but as a response to your alignment. You begin to understand abundance not as accumulation, but as openness. The more you give, the more life gives back, not always in the ways the ego expects, but in the exact form the soul requires. And then there's the paradox of being both more sensitive and more resilient. You cry more easily, at beauty, at cruelty, at glimpses of the divine in the ordinary. And yet you are unshakable. Because when you know you are not just this body, this thought, this passing storm, no wave can drown you. You start living as a lighthouse, soft in your glow, but anchored in truth. The weirdness also shows up in choices that others don't understand. You might suddenly leave a high-paying job, end a relationship, move to a place that makes no rational sense. But inside it feels like inevitability. You're not following logic, you're following life. And life, once you align with it, becomes a silent teacher that never steers you wrong, even when the path looks strange. You also begin to feel the earth again. Trees feel like kin. Animals carry messages. You might find yourself talking to the wind, not out of madness, but out of reverence. Nature becomes not a backdrop, but a teacher. You stop trying to conquer the world and begin collaborating with it. Your footsteps become gentler, your consumption more mindful. You are not separate. You never were. This is the real implication of spiritual enlightenment. It doesn't take you out of life. It transforms your experience of it. It doesn't make you above the world. It makes you deeply embedded in its pulse, its poetry, its paradoxes. You become the bridge between realms, the space where heaven touches earth. And that perhaps is the greatest mystery of all, that the divine hides in the folds of the ordinary, waiting to be remembered through your eyes. So here we are, standing at the threshold where all the strange symbols, sensations, and sacred disturbances converge, not into a clean conclusion, but into a deeper beginning. Enlightenment, as we've seen, does not descend with fanfare or arrive wrapped in gold-threaded robes. It often arrives as a slow disintegration, first of lies, then of certainty, and finally of the illusion that you were ever separate from anything at all. And what follows? A kind of rebirth that does not look like the movies. No beams of heaven-splitting clouds, no triumphant fanfare, just you, waking up again in the same body, the same room, yet no longer living as the same self. There is a peculiar quietness to this arrival, like the hush after a storm, like the stillness before dawn. And in that silence, you begin to hear the deeper music of life, one you hadn't noticed before. It was always there. You just weren't still enough to listen. This is the core secret of enlightenment. It is not an escape, it is an embrace. You stop needing to ascend to other dimensions because you realize that this dimension, this flawed and fragrant world, is already holy. The dirt beneath your nails, the trembling of your voice when speaking raw truth, the ache in your chest when beauty hits too hard to bear. These are not distractions from spirituality. They are the gateway into it. And so, the weirdness remains, but it transforms. What once felt like anomalies now feel like initiations. The odd sensations in your body, they're the whispers of energy learning how to flow through new channels. The sudden tears while watching a child play or a leaf fall, they're reminders of the sacred in all things. The isolation you feel from those who do not understand, it is the soul's cocoon, preparing for its next emergence. You begin to see that enlightenment is not the end of seeking, but the birth of seeing. And once you see, you cannot unsee. You see the pain of the world not as hopeless, but as the soil of awakening. You see every person you meet as a divine fragment trying to remember itself. Even your enemies become mirrors. Even your struggles become prayers. You see that the chaos is not chaos. It is the divine, learning how to dance. And here's the invitation, the final call, the transformation buried inside all these words. Live from this awareness, not as a role, not as a performance, not as something to prove, but as a natural extension of what you already are. Let your weirdness become your wisdom. Let your sensitivity become your superpower. Let the strangeness of your awakening guide you back to the one place you've always been trying to reach. Now, speak differently, walk more slowly, love more recklessly, create like the divine is painting through your fingers. Listen as if the universe is always speaking, because it is. And remember that even in your most human moments, you are still infinite. Even when you forget, you are still the dreamer behind the dream. You were never meant to fit in with the world as it was. You were meant to help birth the world as it could be. That is the quiet revolution of enlightenment. Not to rise above the world, but to return to it with such presence, such depth, such luminous strangeness, that everything you touch begins to awaken too. And so, dear traveler of the thresholds, you do not walk alone. You walk with all of us. With the dreamers, the cracked open ones, the wanderers who forgot and remembered again. You walk with the stars in your chest and the earth in your breath. And from this moment on, nothing is truly ordinary again. This was never just a video, it was a remembrance. And now it is a calling. Answer it.